Welcome to the City of Boynton Beach special meeting today, Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 at 3:33 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Stephen B. Grant,
Present.
Vice Mayor Woodrow Hay,
Present.
Commissioner Justin Katz, Commissioner Christina Romulus,
Present.
and Commissioner Ty Penserga.
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like everyone to please rise for invocation by our Vice Mayor, Reverend Woodrow Hay, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us all pray. Father God, we thank you for another day. We thank you for being God all by yourself. You're the only one who sit high and you look low. We pause on this special day to recognize all of our veterans on this D-Day. We pray, Father, that you will continue to stand by them and let this never be forgotten, what we went through in December 7th, 1941. And so, Father, I ask you now to come into this meeting, make your presence known. Help us to make the decision that will be for the betterment of this city and for our citizens. And we'll be so honored, Lord, to give you all the honor and all the praise, for you highly deserve it. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Let every heart say, Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, and if we have Commissioner Katz is now here with us. Agenda approval, any additions, deletions, or corrections? I do want to let the public know that they will have an opportunity to speak on item 1B before the commission approves or votes on the approval of the ARPA spending framework.
I have no amendments.
So may I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve as
Second.
presented.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Approved staff. David, our item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't know if our city manager want to just open it up, or would you just like me to proceed?
Proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. We are here today to talk about the American Rescue Plan and briefly go over a framework for a presentation for your approval. As far as the agenda is concerned, you will be presented with a brief overview of the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. We will discuss the public outreach efforts to date. We will speak about the alignment with the FIU Community Needs Assessment, share feedback from our nonprofits, provide information regarding available funding, provide recommendations around the implementation framework, and then turn it over to this commission for discussion. I have with me as co-presenters John Durgan, who's working two roles at this time. He's the Economic Development Manager, Karish Lejeune, who's our ARPA Project Manager, Mara Frederickson, Director of Finance, and of course our City Manager will help guide us through this presentation. Next slide, Yuri.
One second, David, I'm bringing it up.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Next slide. All right, just as briefly as a reminder to the public, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law on March 11, 2021, and was established as the U.S. Department of Treasury's coronavirus local funding recovery funds. Within that, they supported several objectives. Those objectives were to support urgent COVID response efforts. The second one was to replace lost revenue for eligible state and local territorial tribal governments. It was also to support immediate economic stabilization for households and businesses. And the last objective was to address systemic public health and economic challenges for underserved communities. Next slide, Yuri. Within that framework, the city of Boynton Beach was allocated $13,647,904. I always like to round up and finance lawyers to make sure that I give you the exact dollar amount. The Treasury issued an interim final rule on May 17th, 2021. And within the rule, they determined what those funds could be used for. They were to support public health expenditures in response to COVID-19, address negative impacts to our economically disadvantaged communities, replace lost public sector revenue, provide premium pay for essential workers, and invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Next slide, Yuri. In response, the city of Boynton Beach sought public input by various methods. And John, I'll have you address these next few slides.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. John Durgan, Economic Development Manager. Briefly, just to go over some of the public outreach that we did for the ARPA. We did hold 2 public input meetings for the general public. The first one being on September 30th at 6 p.m. in the commission chambers. It was a hybrid meeting. October 28th at 6 p.m., which was at the fire station number 3. That was in person only. And then we had another public input meeting that was open to the general public, but it was really geared towards our nonprofit providers to kind of get their input, as they do provide essential services here in the city. And we really wanted to get their direct input on some of those needs in the community. We're currently holding the city commission workshop right now. And then the additional outreach, we created a public input survey that was created on August 9th. So it's been out for around 4 months now. We've gotten a lot of input, over 300 submissions to date, and those were available in English, Spanish, and in Creole. We also are utilizing, and we'll discuss this further in the presentation, the FIU community assessment. Those 5 focus areas align with a lot of the eligible uses in the ARPA. So we're going to use that as one of our guiding principles for some funding availability for the public and for nonprofit organizations. Again, at different community meetings, whether it was the Downtown Business Coalition meeting, chamber events, our Business Over Coffee meetings, we always mention the ARPA. Always ask people to participate, send in their surveys, email us, give us a call. That was always one of our ways to get that out, as well at any sort of public engagement or meeting we were at. We did receive a lot of phone calls and emails that we did take in and collect. That's going to be part of our data. It was included in all of our city newsletters, as well as all throughout social media. So those were some of the ways that we try to get input from the public on what their needs are right now, because we know that's critical for our ARPA efforts. Next slide, please.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
go back to the next slide, please, or the previous slide. Thank you. Do you have a head count of how many people attended these different public input meetings?
I don't currently, but I'll be more than happy to find that out for you.
Okay, can we just, if y'all could just give me a ballpark of the approximate number that showed up to each, like 30s, 50s, 100s?
Not nowhere near that. For the meeting that was in person, I know at the fire station we had around 4.
Okay.
For the first public meeting, it was September 30th. I don't recall how many were at that meeting. I would ballpark it.
And can you also look online for the attendees?
Of course.
So I think that's kind of, I'm sure there's a lot of people attending virtually as well.
Yeah, and we can count who was in the room, from the camera as well, so we can find out that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Next slide, please, Yuri.
I'm sorry, John, you just may want to add, we also had the public surveys. How many responses did we receive there as well?
Yes, we've received 313 responses in English, 1 in Creole, and 1 in Spanish. Next slide, please, Yuri. And just to demonstrate some of the responses from the public, I'm going to show you some graphs here that are questions directly from our survey in the final results as of today. The first one here is just basically what were your top 3 issues you feel the city should address with this funding, and you can go down the list to see what those responses were. The first one was water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. For some other responses, this one's not going to be number 1, so that it was really tough to determine how that one got to number 1, because in many cases it was not number 1 or close to it. Small business assistance was number 2, public safety was number 3, rental and mortgage assistance, and so on. So this is just, again, the top 3 issues you feel the city should address with this funding, and all that information was consolidated, and these were the results. Next slide, please, Jerry. Another question, these are all the different categories that are eligible uses for the ARPA funding. And we asked the public to rank them from 1 to 7. And these were the results. A to households and individuals was number 1. A to businesses was number 2. Hazard pay for essential workers was number 3. Investments in water and sewer infrastructure was 4. Public health programs and services was 5. Replacement of lost public sector revenue was number 6, and then investment in broadband was number 7.
John, just to be clear, the x-axis, the numbers at the bottom of this graph, this is number of respondents. Is that correct?
This is the consolidated rankings from SurveyMonkey. So this is not the number of respondents. We had over 300 responses for this question alone. This is just the consolidated numbers, so they can rank them 1 to 7.
Got it. Thank you.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
can you explain what the intention behind the question or the replacement of lost public sector revenue used to fund local general government operations? That was something that the members of the public, explain to me what that means.
Yeah, so this is just one of the eligible uses for the ARPA was we can use it to replenish any lost revenues the city incurred due to the pandemic. So this was just, again, we included it because it was an eligible use, so we just had them ranked at 1 to 7.
So we're just asking the members of the public to tell us how they would ideally like to see these funds spent and allocated. That's what these answers are referencing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, Yuri. And just the last one we're going to show here. What was your biggest challenge in recovering from the pandemic? And overwhelmingly, it was fear of the illness and being around other people. Overall, mental health came in at number 2. Financial, reduced income, and then again, financial new debt incurred because of the pandemic, and then so on down the list here. And these were the items that we had on here. We came up with those thinking these were some of the issues that the public may be dealing with. So we kind of had them select which was their biggest challenge. What were they really dealing with during the pandemic? Again, just to give you some information when you guys do make your ultimate decision. Now we'll kick it over to David or Carice to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Next slide. Thank you, Yuri. That's the correct slide. Just wanted to discuss, again, we wanted to present the alignment of the public responses with the work that's currently being done by FIU on a community needs assessment. This commission has heard some of the preliminary information regarding FIU's work within the community. Their role is to identify those challenges around equity, what the community feels is important, what needs to be done to close a lot of these equity gaps around five focus areas, and they are healthcare, education, housing, public safety, economic opportunity. And the thinking is to align what the community is saying is important with what the community is saying is important with regard to ARP funding, so that we can help leverage our funding and present this to the community, to the commission, so that they will see what the alignment is between FIU priorities and those priorities with from the community. And so, Carice, you want to pick up from here?
Good afternoon, Carice Lejeune, ARPA Project Manager. Yuri, could we have the next slide, please? So as my colleague, Mr. Scott, had just mentioned that coming out of the FIU study, there were 5 categories: economic stability and resilience, housing affordability, home ownership, educational opportunities and job skill development, healthcare access and health outcome, and criminal justice safety. Next slide, please. So what's really unique and I find exciting about what the city of Boynton Beach has done is that we've taken the FIU community needs assessment along with the public survey responses, and we've melded them in with our ARPA categories. And if you recall, our 5 categories under ARPA was revenue loss, public health, negative economic impact, water sewer broadband infrastructure, and premium pay. Next slide, please. So what you'll see here in these next few slides are the 5 FIU recommendation initiatives. The first one being economic stability and resilience. And what you see next to it are eligible uses per ARPA that we extracted from the public survey. So not everything that was in the public survey was an eligible use under ARPA, and not everything within the FIU study was an eligible use under ARPA. But what you have before you and the next slides after are eligible uses that fit into those FIU categories. So in economic stability and resilience, we have small business grants and loans, target the hardest hit industries, and for Boynton Beach, it's the fishing and art industries. Supporting businesses that didn't qualify for federal SBA programs, technical assistance report, job training, direct payments to households, food assistance, and prioritize low to moderate income families. Next slide, please. Again, under the FIU study, housing and affordability and home ownership was the second category. And you'll probably recognize some of these ARPA eligible uses for rental and mortgage assistant, affordable housing, utility assistance, housing counseling, home rehabilitation, and homelessness services. Next slide, please. The third initiative under FIU study was educational opportunities and job skills development. And here we have the eligible ARPA uses of broadband infrastructure, internship and mentorship programs, literacy programs, art enhancement programs, the prioritizing children that experienced at-home learning challenges, and entrepreneurship training. Next slide, please. Under healthcare access and health outcomes, we have mental health services, vaccine programs supporting physical education programs at schools, public health clinics, childcare, home visiting programs, substance and domestic abuse, community health workers. Next slide, please. And then the last FIU initiative was the criminal justice and safety category, of which ARPA eligible projects would be community violence intervention programs, law enforcement efforts to reduce gun violence, investing in technology and equipment for law enforcement, and enhanced services for foster youth. Next slide, please.
Bruce,
Yes, sir.
as I understand it, what you're saying here that the categories on the left and the color represent the FIU category that they came up with, and the items on the right are the item that the community citizens came up with.
Yes, sir.
And who did that marriage of everything together?
That was a team effort, sir.
Meaning staff?
Yes, sir. Your staff ARPA team. We looked at what the, again, and I'll just reiterate this again for you. The FIU initiatives were based on the data-driven study that the university did. And then we have the survey from the public. And then we have the ARPA eligible uses. So taking the ARPA eligible uses and merging them where they fit under the FIU initiatives, then taking the public's responses and saw where those fit in ARPA eligibility and the FIU study, and put all that together to create those 5 initiatives with the eligible uses on the right-hand side.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I know it gets a little.
And it's one big spreadsheet that John set up.
I bet it was.
Took us multiple
We
hours.
did our best to condense it
Yeah.
for everyone. So nonprofit concept proposals. Since the inception of receiving ARPA funding, the city of Boynton Beach has received numerous unsolicited proposals, which we have taken and we have put them, listed them for you in the next slide. Could you give me the next slide, please, Yuri? So these are the ones that we have received in time to put in this presentation. We have received 2 others, I believe, since this was created, but this just gives you an idea of the type of nonprofit services that are available in the community. The Literacy Coalition, AmeriCorps, which we have here in the city, Building Better Readers, they have a budget request of $309,600. And I believe that you received a packet of those unsolicited proposals that you can read through to see exactly what it is that they're looking to program, to offer in the city. And the same for the rest of them, just to go through quickly. Cherry Hills Transformation Neighborhood Revitalization from Habitat for Humanity, a Summer Youth Economic Empowerment Program from Connect to Greatness, the Center for Entrepreneurship, Workforce, and STEAM from the GBDC Entrepreneur Institute, the Black Business Empowerment Center from the Mental Health Committee, Emergency Shelter and Outreach Services from AVDA, the Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse, Connecting School Children to Work Experiences from Junior Achievement to the Palm Beaches and Treasure Coast, Trinity Care Counseling from the Boynton Beach Coalition of Black Clergy, the R.M. Lee Cultural Arts and Community Resource Center from the St. John Community Promise, Inc., and then short-term housing pilot project for LGBTQ and others, youth in Boynton Beach from the Vita Nova Incorporated. And as I said, these are the unsolicited proposals that we received, and we have since received a few others. So it is our belief that there are many more nonprofit and or businesses in the community that are interested in ARPA funding. At this point in time, I would like to ask Mara Fredrickson, your finance director, to come up and talk about the next few slides, and then I will come back to the unsolicited proposals and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Mara Fredrickson, Director of Financial Services. So the slide you see before you gives you basically the breakdown of the funding as to what the first 2 tranches will look like. Our first tranche we received in May of 6.8 million, and we anticipate another 6.8 million in May of this coming year. Some of the things that have already been before commission, I'll go down this list, are the housing study at 29,640, our tutoring program, which was 28,147, our wellness program for our fire and police employees, which was 67,237, our vaccine incentive for the public, which constituted gift cards and giving out vaccines at our Hester Center, which is about 60,000. I don't have that solidified yet, so that's why you'll see that number in red. Our revenue losses are 1.95 million for last year, and that was in this budget already approved. The P2P rental assistance, that's our partnership with Pathways to Prosperity with the county. Right now, that's an ongoing process. So again, you'll see that in red. That's an estimated number. Your vaccination incentive for PBA is broken out. We had 70 employees that qualified that received $250 or will receive in this coming pay period. And that was based on eligibility on the bargaining. They had to reach a certain percentage to receive the full 500. The next vaccination incentive was for the rest of the employees. You had 414 at 500, so that's $207,000. We right now have an anticipated revenue loss for next year, which will come in the budget process in July, of about $2 million. Again, that's an estimate, so you see that in red. Approved at our November 30th special meeting was the Wells Landing funding for $500,000. Our premium pay, we had 781 employees that were active at this last pay period, so that comes to about 1.5 million. And then we anticipate project manager costs about 150,000, but that's just an estimate. So right now, based on both tranches coming in, that leaves us at about $7 million left from the ARPA funding. Next slide, please. In this slide, you'll see those committed amounts which add up to about 6.4 million that I just went over in the last slide. Revenue losses, 1.95 million, and then the 2 million estimated, which will come back through the budget process. In public health, which was your vaccine incentives and things like that, was about 351,000. Negative economic impact fell about 632,000, and then the premium pay was 1.5 million. So that total committed cost is 6.4 million. Next slide, please. So your ARPA team has broken down the remaining $7 million from those first two tranches into priorities or buckets. And that you'll see listed here. So we've listed 2.5 million for economic stability and resilience, 2 million for housing affordability and home ownership, $1 million for educational opportunities and job skills development, $1 million for healthcare access and healthcare outcomes, and 500,000 for criminal justice and safety. And then I'm going to ask Carice to come back up for the next slide, please.
So what you have before you now is the nonprofit unsolicited proposals that the city had received up until about, I think, about a week ago. And you can see on the left-hand side, and there's two slides, so the other two are on the next slide. We've taken those FIU initiatives and the proposed amount to put in that particular bucket. And then in the middle slide area, we've put the nonprofit concept proposals. So briefly reading through and pulling out elements of the programs, we have temporarily put them in these different categories. So you get an idea of what type of funding and how much is being requested at this point. So,
Carice?
sir, yes.
One moment, Carice. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing. Just for a quick clarification, these numbers are their proposed numbers or the city's recommendation of how much to allocate? Which I'm trying to understand which is which.
Yes, sir. So in the blue on the left-hand side is the staff's recommendation of what to allocate for each of the 5 buckets or initiatives. And in the middle section with the nonprofit concept proposals, those amounts were given to the city by the different nonprofits. This is based upon their budgetary requests for their programming. And then in the very right-hand side, the totals, we've taken whatever programming from the nonprofits were in there and added them up. So for example, sir, the economic stability and resilience, we have the Black Business Empowerment Center and the RM Lee Cultural Arts and Community Resource Center. The RM Lee Cultural Arts and Community Resource Center, they're requesting 600,000. We don't have a number yet from the Black Business Empowerment Center. However, at this point in time, we know that roughly $600 is being requested for that particular bucket. And then going down, affordable housing affordability and home ownership, staff recommendation is to put 2 million in that bucket. And then between the Cherry Hill transformation, neighborhood revitalization, and the short-term housing pilot project from Vita Nova, the request thus far is $384,000. Looking at educational opportunities and job skills development, staff recommendation is $1 million. And then as you can see, the different nonprofits request add up to $3,575,000 and $366. Yuri, next slide, please. And then here we have the last 2 buckets, which is healthcare access and health outcomes for $1 million. So far, the request has been $800,000. And then criminal justice and safety for $500,000, which is a staff recommendation. We've not received any requests so far. So next, yes, sir. Oh,
No.
okay. Next slide, please. Yes, sir.
I do have a question. Has all of the requests from the public been categorized? Have they been put in one bucket or the other? All of the ones that we've received thus far?
That was in a earlier slide, the one that John provided to you. That lets you know what their requests were.
No, I mean here, where you are putting them in a bucket that has dollars associated with it.
No, sir.
Okay.
What we've done so far is we've taken the requests that we've already received and we've put that in that framework to give the commission an idea of what this framework would look like. And of course, we wanted to bring forward to the commission what we've received so far as with non-solicited nonprofit proposals. So where we are at this point is that we are looking to the commission for procurement guidance. As staff, we do not recommend, excuse me, immediate allocation of the funding today based upon what you've seen on the screen. For one reason, the proposals have not been fully vetted. As I stated or went through, I pulled out some ideas, but we haven't really done the deep dive into each of the proposals. Also, that besides the unsolicited proposals, we have since received 2 others, and I'm certain that there are more out there in the community that they might not even known that they had the ability to go ahead and just send something in. Yes, sir?
I have 2 related questions. Is there a uniform application that people can fill out? And related to that, what exactly is the vetting process? Is there some standard things you look for? How do you assess what's a strong, valid, reputable proposal versus one that doesn't have enough meat, if you will?
Those are excellent questions, and I'm going to address those for you right now.
Excellent.
So what we're looking at is either the direct allocation to nonprofit proposals today with what you have, which of course we're not recommending because, you know, it could be more equitable to allow others to apply. There, the city.
Excuse me, Carice. Mr. Wright, we hear your comments and they're disruptive. If you continue making comments that we hear, I'm going to ask you to leave. Thank you. Sorry, Carice.
No worries. Another option is city partnership opportunities, like what we have done over the summer, partnering with the schools in our district to provide that summer tutoring program for the middle schoolers. And then, of course, the NOFOs, the Notice of Funding Opportunities. So let's talk a little bit about the NOFOs at this point. So there will need to be an application process, and the application at this time has not been created because we are looking for direction from the commission. However, when we do have an ability, or if we have an ability to put out grant opportunities to the entire community through the Notice of Funding Opportunity, we'll have a application. We will hold a application workshop, and we will be using requirements from the federal guidance for ARPA and also a risk analysis. The federal requirements come directly from the compliance and reporting document from the federal government, and the responsibilities that go along with being a subrecipient to the city, which include federal uniform guidelines from 2 CRF Part 200. Some of the other requirements that are, I would say, suggested very strongly or encouraged by the federal government are what are referred to as risk assessment requirements, such as if the funds are awarded, does the nonprofit have the ability to account for these funds separately and distinctly from other sources of revenue? Do they have written policies and procedures in place? What are their financial management systems, and are they able to track their actual expenditures? We would look for internal controls to ensure that federal funds are used solely for pre-authorized purposes. What are their document record retention policy? That needs to adhere to 2 CFR 200. Potential personal or organizational conflicts of interests, and fiscal and administrative oversight of grant awards. Who is the person who's going to be responsible for that in the organization, and are they experienced? We would look for policies and procedures in place to manage subawards and monitor activities of subrecipients that would be on the place of the city. So we will have to monitor all activities and all expenditures throughout the life of the grant. And then time distribution records, which actually accurately reflect the work performed on the specific activities which are in the approved programming. Budget estimates don't qualify as support for charges to federal awards. So I hope that I have adequately answered your question, sir. There are a lot of requirements that would go into this application.
You have, and Mayor, if I may just make a suggestion to staff, is that as you proceed through the process and you have these conversations with all of these nonprofits, I would highly encourage everybody to speak with each other, because there may be similar proposals offering similar services, and there may be space to A, partner, and B, potentially save money, right? We may be able to reduce additional overhead or administrative cost, and we could spend more of that money to the actual service of the community. And so I just want to make that recommendation that, if we can promote partnerships so we can be more efficient with the spending of the money, those are the projects that I'd be more inclined to support.
Yes, sir. Efficiency and economy of scale.
Absolutely.
I
Economy
understand
of scale.
completely.
Yes.
And part of the Treasury guidance is this is your last source of funding. So look for other sources of funding first on some of on your programs that are proposed. Look at other if there are grants available, CDBG, SHIP funds, stuff like that can possibly be a funding source. Use ARP last. Let that be that final mile, that gap.
And as a one-time expense, because it's obviously non-recurring, right? So
And a
that
big
needs to be
part
part
of
of the calculation.
Right. And the Treasury is going to, they want to see sustainability. So what happens after the 1 or 2 years, however the money is allocated out? What happens to that program? So the recipient has to demonstrate that that program will sustain itself in some form or fashion.
Absolutely.
And not just go away, because that's exactly what they don't want to see is money, put out there and then the program disappears when the funding stops.
Absolutely.
So that's this is a blessing and a curse. I swear, with this ARPA, having access to this money is phenomenal. The work is tremendous. And, I just want to take a minute to thank our ARPA team and staff because the devil's in the detail. And that is the truth here. It's not, we want to make sure we don't get a report. We have to report quarterly to the Treasury on any of the expenditures and they have a 90-day window to come back and say, no, we don't like that. We want this, we want that. And if we can't answer their questions, they're going to take the money back. So we're not moving light speed fast because we want to make sure we don't put ourselves in that position. So I know it's frustrating for some that we're, it's a little slow, but that's why we want to be purposeful and just make sure we don't find ourselves in trouble at the end having to give money back.
Commissioner Katz.
Thank you, first and foremost, to staff. I appreciate the way that you're presenting this to us because I agree 100% that we need to define and clearly communicate the criteria for potential applicants. Right now, we have a number of very positive solicitations, but they were not made based on any of our expectations or the legal requirements pursuant to the funding from the federal government. So I think that many of these proposals, which have merit to them, will find that once the criteria is laid out, there are answers that will have to subsequently be provided to flesh out those proposals so that we're not just, as has been noted, giving money that in a year a program won't exist and it will have had no substantial impact. I guess I have a number of questions, but I won't ask them right now because I presume there's a little bit more, so I don't want to interrupt. But one of them would be, I guess, can we request that any applicant disclose any requests they've made for these funds from other government entities? The reason being, for an example, and this could be for any number of examples, but this first one, the Literacy Coalition, I'm a big proponent of allocating funds to help students who have been victim to COVID slide, particularly those in low and moderate income families. The Literacy Coalition is asking for $300,000. I would like to know where else they're asking for money, different municipalities. Presumably that will be spent in each of those municipalities, but are they asking for money from the school district, which received over $500 million versus our 15? Are they asking money from the county, which received hundreds of millions of dollars? So that's something that I would want to make sure, I'm just getting it out now so I don't forget it, that any entity that's requesting money from us for this disclose if they are making any requests elsewhere, so we know if the Literacy Coalition is asking the school district for $2 million and they're coming to us for 300,000 and the district has $500 million and we only have 15 million, maybe we can advocate for a group going to the school district or the county to request a little bit more so that we can use our funds, again, efficiency and economies of scale as was mentioned. So that's just one thought that popped in my head about making sure we know what is being requested elsewhere to know if we need to be the bearer of the financial allocation or not.
Yes, sir. And I can answer that one for you right now. And I appreciate the question and your comments. On many state and federal grants, they absolutely ask, what other funding sources are you using? And have you received funding from the federal government or from another state agency for this project? So it's totally appropriate. If the the commission would like that information in the application, which we have yet to create, then yes, sir, that can be in there.
That's certainly one that rises to my interest. And another example, which would be if we allocate funds for small businesses to assist them, I would want to know if they already received funds through the CRA or through the city, because maybe there are other businesses who have not, and they need to be prioritized before the money runs out versus someone who already received it, whether it was a PPP loan or whether it was through the CRA or a local entity. So
That
Incorporate in the app, the NOFO.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a very good point, and I am amiss for not bringing that up during my technical presentation. One of the guidance points that we're looking for from the commission is, going forward, if the commission decides that they want to put out notice of funding opportunities for grants, what is your preference? Do you wish for it to be nonprofits only, or would you be open to nonprofits and for-profit businesses? So that's something that can be discussed. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. My technical portion of the presentation is done, and I believe that the next part is for the city manager and Mr. Scott to facilitate you through your discussions, but I'll answer more questions.
I have one more question for now. Are there any criteria by the law that requires the money be spent within our municipality? In other words, is it possible for a nonprofit to come and ask and say that they're going to use these funds for Boynton Beach, but 3 months from now they spend it somewhere else, like in Boca or some other place? Are there any constraints or controls on it, checks and balances?
Well, from the federal government, that is not a criteria, because many cities, especially the large or metropolitan cities, they look at it regionally. However, the city of Boynton Beach can absolutely say that if we are to give you funds, that those funds must be spent in Boynton Beach for the benefit of the Boynton Beach citizens. And whatever they put in their programming, in their application, that is the only thing that they can spend the money on. So as we go through the quarterly reporting, which the subrecipients will be responsible for reporting to the city, they will more than likely have to show not only where those funds were spent, but proof that those funds were spent for the programming that they were approved for.
Commissioner Katz, then Vice Mayor.
Now, I have just a simple question. Chris, of all the treasury guidelines that you've mentioned to us so far, are those mostly strictly from the treasury folks, the government, and we're going to add our own later on? What percentage would you say, as you've stated already, are from the treasury guidelines?
The most stringent from the Treasury guidelines come from the 2 CFR 200, of which every municipality in the state of Florida, I know, maybe even the country, were required to incorporate into their procurement policies several years ago. I would defer to Mara to find out exactly the date. So we are obligated to make sure that the requirements we put in our application comply with those state and federal requirements. Now, the requirements that I read to you off of the sheet, that is a recommended risk analysis from the Department of Justice, and it was being strongly encouraged that recipients follow those guidelines when issuing subrecipient funds.
Thank you.
Sir.
Commissioner Katz?
I do have a couple of questions and now consensus appropriate time since they said they're about to turn it over to, if I want to ask them questions. Is everyone okay with that?
So let me ask, is there more presentation?
Just one more slide.
Okay.
I want to just kind of take you through that.
And I'll defer to Mr. Scott for this slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Carice. And Commissioner, absolutely. In addition to what Carice mentioned, and just to reiterate that the commission could certainly add additional criteria as you have on many of our grants that we have issued, whether or not inside the CRA, outside CRA, or specifically for Boynton residents, by Boynton residents, and those types of things can be added to the criteria as we go forward, as long as it doesn't conflict with the current requirements from the Treasury and the Justice Department. So the next slide, Yuri has up before you. The city manager, you're fine with me proceeding?
Well, I was just going to make a couple comments on that. I think it's important that, so the buckets that we identified earlier where we broke down the 7 million, that's a very rough guideline. And I think that, and one, it's going to change because once we, our recommendation today is to implement the competitive grant process. So one, it provides opportunity for the entire community and others that just didn't have their ear to the ground to hear about the ARPA, where we'll advertise it. We will put it out there that there's other opportunities for people to submit. We may find that what's coming in and then what gets ultimately considered responsive to the NOFO may be way up here. And I know, and that sounds funny, there's NOFA and NOFO. You may have a bunch in economic impact and not much of anything in criminal safety. So we're going to be coming back to you with those responses. And then, the commission's going to adjust where they want, what their priority is. And that's the other question we want you to think about is what's the most important to you? And I don't expect you to answer that now. I think it's important to, if we go through the competitive process, to make that decision after you see what the requests and needs are of the community. So that's just a guide, that it's not a number that's going to stay there. It's going to move around. And this is, I think, the hardest part for everybody to understand as we go through this. This is completely fluid. This is all conversations. All of these lists in here were meetings we had with folks, with Annette, with the Literacy Coalition, Habitat, saying, hey, we have some ARP money here. There's some amazing things we can do in this community. Let's sit down and talk. Or they called us. We've received emails on it. That type. So it's been a constant community conversation, and that's what needs to continue to happen. So that's where I want you to understand where that $7 million breakdown of the 222 and 1 is merely just where to start. And I don't even know if we really even needed to do that when I kind of look back in terms of, it's a little early yet.
Lori?
Yes.
In your discussions internally with staff, have you set some sort of timeline or some sort of benchmark? I mean, this could go on for quite some time, right? And we do have a long period. Was it 3 years?
We've got 2 years to get the money committed by December of 24, and then by December of 26, it has to be physically spent.
Right.
So we're ready. We've been collecting applications. There's, when you think of the Baltimores and the big cities out there, they're doing NOFOs. They're hiring other foundations to distribute their money. So there's a million ways people are handling this. We're collecting applications. I think we have a very good idea of what our application could look like, but we want to put that together and bring that back to you. I don't want to put David on the spot, but I think we still need to kind of bring that back to you and say, yeah, we'll put the Boynton Beach requirement in there. Do we want to add some things to tighten up what's already required? Or so.
I know there's urgency in the need.
2 or 3 months.
Don't want this to drag on so long. Right. So I was wondering if there was a ballpark estimate of within
depending
4
on
months, within 3 months.
I think your guidance today, if we end up doing the NOFO, yeah, we can get that out on the streets after the holidays.
Right. Yes.
I think we'd be ready by the end of January. And yell at me or throw something at me if I'm
that was our target by around February, March timeframe. We should be on the street based upon your direction this evening.
Get a draft to you by end of January, early February, coming off the holidays, and then make sure we have everything in there that you want to see, and then put it out there. And it depends on how long we want to put it out there. We want to put it on the streets for 30 days. We can do that. We can do 60 days, however long.
I wouldn't want it
Okay.
to surpass our time up here. We have to be conscious
Right,
of that. So
Exactly.
Well,
So we would move probably pretty quickly. Yeah, that's why I just need if we want to go that route, we're gonna move as
Yes.
fast as we can.
I'm pretty
you
sure
get to make the
applicants here
decision.
wouldn't
Right.
mind moving
And you
faster as
should.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I agree with moving expeditiously, but by the same token, once we start the vetting process, I want to make sure that those agencies who may be missing some minor stuff be given the opportunity to comply, if you will, that they are not, the door is not closed on them just because a piece is missing. So I want to make sure that we don't do that.
Yeah, it's not going to be a hard bid situation where I think there's going to be definitely post submittal conversations of, hey, we need a little more information on this or what have you. I think that's the whole process of that. We can write the rule. We can set the rules on how we want to do that.
And your concern, sir, actually was talked about with the ARPA team, and Mr. Scott came up with a great idea. He said, let's have a workshop for applications. Once we know what that application looks like and we get the notice out on the street, let's invite people to come in and we will walk them step by step through that application to help them fill it out.
That makes me feel much better.
Mayor.
Thank you.
I have a couple of comments based on the submittals that I saw come in, just to give my personal feedback in preparation for this process that we'll go into next, in terms of laying out a specific outline of what we want to see from the applicants, and then having them submit proposals. So I just want to give a little bit of feedback to each of the applicants that were able to submit some things for this initial kind of exploratory round. For the Literacy Coalition, I would like to see an effort made to increase the salary of the AmeriCorps members. Being the director of programs at Path to College and having had some of your AmeriCorps members working with us, I know that one of the most difficult parts of the role in the position was the salary and being residents here of Palm Beach County and how expensive it is to live here. So I would like to see in your request an effort to increase the salary of your AmeriCorps members. For the Habitat for Humanity proposal, I'm not sure if you already do this, but I would like to see an apprenticeship program embedded within your process, especially because you're building houses all the time, and the residents, of course, who will be the recipients of these homes, they help to build the homes. And I know you get volunteers, but I would like a specific apprenticeship program created within your process that allows for individuals within the community who want to learn construction skills and all that stuff to be able to do that. I would also like to see listed based on the list that you provided, the block by block initiative. I'd like to see that increase to at least 5 blocks that you would cover, if not more. The summer empowerment program, this was
Commissioner Ramos, I mean, these are individual statements to the applicants. If you'd like to speak to them separately, I think that's something you can do rather than go through the whole list. So just to save on time, we only have 28 minutes left and we didn't let the community speak yet. So
sure.
I'd like to let the community speak now,
Well,
unless the commission has any other comments.
Sure, no problem. So I do have comments for each of the applicants who sent us information in. If you'd like to reach out to me personally to hear what my comments are, feel free to. Thank you.
Yes, and I think that's also for the rest of the commission. I don't feel like we'll put in a cone of silence or anything like that. We want to be working with the community so that there's no surprises. And well, let's go from there. So I'm going to open it up to public comments for 2 minutes.
Didn't you want to say something? He had his hand up.
I understand the time crunch. If I get 3 minutes.
Yeah.
For staff, first question, do we have a list of all nonprofits registered within the city limits of Boynton Beach?
Yes, through our BTRs,
Yes,
if they're properly licensed.
if they're,
With that being the case, I would personally like to see a communication sent once the application is devised to every nonprofit in the city so that everyone is aware and we get the most competitive process, because there might be great ideas that people don't know to offer because they don't know about this. So that's one. Two, is there a requirement in federal law or otherwise, certainly we could create one, that the funds that are allocated cannot be used to cover existing operational costs of any entity, of a nonprofit?
Yes, sir. That is in the reporting and compliance guidelines from the Treasury.
Thank you. Two more questions. One, if somebody were asking for $1 million and they gave a timeline that it was supposed to last for, for 2 years because they have a number of years suspended hypothetically, we would be able to, or is it already envisioned to allocate funds in tranches so that we're not just cutting $1 million check for 2 years worth of proposal? We don't want to give it all to someone, and then if something goes wrong, it's gone, and we can't, there's no accountability or no measurement or no attempt to say, you know what, you didn't do it, you're done, you don't get the second year.
The distribution of funds is totally at the discretion of the city commission.
Okay, and then the last comment I'll make, anything relative to helping students, in my opinion, needs to be driven by targeted enrollment, meaning that we're not trying to open summer camps or programs for any student, because some students do not need remediation, and there are other students who desperately they needed it before COVID, they need it even more now because of COVID. And what I would request is that any ultimate agreement struck between the city to allocate funds for anybody saying that they're going to work with students within our communities, that a list of students be derived based on metrics provided by the school district, which is how our tutoring program over the summer was. It wasn't, we're starting a tutoring program, the first 30 kids who show up get in. It was, here's a list of kids who are desperately behind grade level in reading and writing and math, et cetera. So going along with the logic that I have and that others have expressed, is we're trying to stretch these dollars to have the most impact, the most return. Anything involving students, I don't want to see summer camps. I want to see targeted COVID or academic assistance for those in need of it. So that's my 3 minutes.
That is an excellent comment, because that's part of your discussion. Because what we're looking for, we do need to require metrics, and we do need to have the recipients meet outcomes. But that is something that we would love to have the feedback from the commission in different types of programming. What are the metrics that you would like to see in place? So the suggestion of using existing types of metrics it's not only easy for us, but it helps us meet the evidence-based requirement. So these metrics are being used by other, I guess, educational institutions right now. Then it's obviously an evidence-based program, which we can pull those metrics from. So thank you.
Thank you all for the answers.
And
Oh,
Mayor,
I'd like to
sorry.
open up to public comments. We'll have our comments afterwards. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. Bishop Bernard Wright, CEO of Bernard Wright Ministries, Real Talk Consultants and Marketing, and the Robert E. Wells Foundation, member of the Historic Resource Preservation Board, and member of the Student Advisory Council at Ponciana. I'm making all this clear just for the records, because here is Bernard Wright Ministries, a 501c nonprofit entity, and they've been operating this city for about, 10, 11 years, 9 years in consistent community activism. Boynton strong also, and I want to represent them tonight. We have been in this pandemic active still, feeding folks and doing a lot of other things. One of the main things, community violence intervention program, been one of my things. I've been doing a walk against gun violence, trying to do it every month, trying to get people who have been very strongly impacted by it to join us in that, to make a statement. Also with tutoring. My boy, thank God for that. They won the Super Bowl this year. We got 300 athletes out there with the Bulldogs. Been talking about this since the pandemic. Being on that advisory student council, let me explain something to you. We have always been way behind blacks, especially the way the system has been set up educationally, which has to be changed. They have a problem with word problem because of our speaking, totally different by the grace of God. So being on that advisory council, this was one of the things we wanted to be considered. All right, so tutoring is something we need. Now, I got my boy in the tutoring, he's honor roll student, not on a top flight wide receiving cornerback, and he brought Boynton and put him on the map. I would like for y'all to commend them, see if y'all can get them, bring them down here to be honored. They can see what it's like to even be in a city commission meeting by the grace of God. So now I would like Bernard Wright Ministries and Boynton Strong to be very well considered. And I would like to get with you so we can be walked through how to get
Bernard, into the microphone, please.
so that we can get this money so we can appropriate it appropriately to the community, change for the better for the people. So we are proof in the pudding. Two entities have been consistently doing things for the people, so we shouldn't be left out of this. And I appreciate it very much when things of this nature is coming, we be invited, we are know, so we don't have to come up here and say, hey, come on and walk us through this. Our proposal would have been there with an amount there. So I wanted to be open for we to submit our proposal. By the grace of God, God bless y'all. It's been a great work for everybody. Thank you.
And Yuri, I want you to remind everybody that the raise hand function and be able to ask questions for our virtual attendees.
Yes, virtual attendees may hit the raise hand icon or ask a question when that feature is enabled.
Do we have someone next from the audience?
Hi, good afternoon. Annette Gray, GBDC Entrepreneurship Institute, 1500 Gateway Boulevard, Boynton Beach. I think it's important that we also remind staff and participants and the commission that the city of Boynton Beach municipality boundaries are somewhat complex. Only because I worked here 20 years ago, I remember that businesses beyond the military trail, is that correct? Are the boundaries? I think we should include the boundaries map with the grant so that folks realize, or you need to have a discussion about the geographic boundaries for qualifications of the nonprofits or the organizations that will compete for this grant. I don't think that is very well publicized, right? Because if you're outside of military, you get Boynton Water, you get Boynton Utilities, you think you're within the Boynton corporate boundaries, but you may in fact not be. So that's something very crucial. And as someone who worked with small businesses and ran into this with trying to get them funds from the CBD dollars and the CRA dollars, that became an issue. There are a lot of businesses in Boynton Beach who could not participate because they were beyond the corporate boundaries. And we haven't had that discussion, and I think it needs to be had. The Center for Workforce Development, we have been doing businesses in Boynton Beach and Palm Beach County for 20 years. Our proposal was set up in a way to capture some of the work we're already doing and an expansion on some of the work that we will do as a result of COVID. And it was interesting because the 500,000 that was mentioned under law enforcement, we have been doing a youth crime prevention program that we have gotten funding from the Boynton Beach Police Department and the Sheriff Department to do. So there isn't in fact no request for those funds. It's just incorporated under one center. That center is proposed to be in Boynton for Boynton Beach students by Boynton Beach newly hired staff. So when you get the proposal, remember that there are consolidated efforts under one roof that do multiple things, because we want to catch the students at an early age and work with them through college and after college. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. And so that will probably be something as part of the application, is the amount of money for each of the categories versus the total for one of the categories. Yep.
Good afternoon, Ernest Mignoli, 710 Northeast 7th Street, Boynton Beach, condo 407. Purchased and moved in there November of 2020. Since that time, for various reasons, I've become very interested in Boynton Beach politics, Boynton Beach reaction to COVID, Boynton Beach reaction to federal money that's granted to municipalities, and the processes that go on here, especially at the open public meetings. I've expressed in the past my concerns that I feel that this particular administration and its agents, city manager, city attorney, commissioner members, et cetera, it's been my opinion, not a personal opinion, it's been my opinion that there are lots of conflicts that are going on. And I found that the process open to a taxpayer like myself to question those conflicts, to be able to ask questions, is denied. And here's an example. Here's a perfect example. You've dominated the use of the money from the federal government in terms of where you think it should go, who you think should get it. You picked out of human beings certain people who are human beings who live in Boynton Beach, who maybe belong to a certain lifestyle. Well, then they should get a lot of attention and a lot of money over just general people from Boynton Beach, because the federal money is for general people. It's not supposed to be earmarked for certain lifestyle people, certain religious people, certain ethnic, certain economic, certain anything. It's for people. And it's supposed to be for people first, not second, not arts, businesses, music, parties, functions, things that you paying city employees to get vaccinated. Look, these are not good use of money. That money is for food and clothing and homes and getting kids to walk to school safely, getting lights on streets, getting the crime down in this city. And most of the things that you talk about here, in my opinion, are very partisan. I've gotten to know you all. I study from what you put out on Facebook and on your public resumes, et cetera. And, I guess you all think it's funny, but you have a lot of conflicts here. And I find when you come to meetings like this, the way it's obvious, you're always smiling at somebody, you call each other by first names, and I don't like it. And I don't think it's fair. And I don't think that this administration that's on the way out at this point, thank you.
And I congratulate you. God be the glory.
Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, Gina Griffin with Junior Achievement of the Palm Beaches and Treasure Coast. We're celebrating 40 years of service this year. Since 1981, we've inspired and prepared 738,000 youth throughout our 5-county area, teaching them financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and workforce readiness programs, which are provided free of charge to all public school students based on our funding from the community. Last year, in the last 2 years, despite the pandemic, we have tripled our impact from 20,000 kids a year to 60,000 kids a year. And right here in Boynton Beach, we doubled our impact from 2,300 students to 5,000 students. And we're seeking to reach at least that many children throughout Boynton Beach this year too. I wanted to clarify that in our proposal, the 1.6 million is our overall organizational budget. We were seeking $145,000, which breaks down to about $29 per student served. And I'd also like to invite you to come to Cross Point Elementary, either December 10th, Friday, or December 16th, because we're serving the entire school, kindergarten through 5th grade, through volunteer mentors who are being trained by our staff to teach our curriculum, teaching little kindergartners needs versus wants, and then our programs grow as the children grow and their knowledge expands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today?
Doing well.
So I'm here today because I want to make sure that I highlight sexual exploitation and abuse of children. I'm with the Sexual Exploitation Abuse Child Protection Agency, and I wanted to be sure that we had funding for education. We want to be able to bring a academy here to Boynton Beach to educate the community members that are 18 and older, and police department and parks and recreation department, along with the commission. We want to be able to provide education that will help prepare against sexual crimes and prevent them from happening to children, and provide the identity of what the signs look like when a child is being sexually abused. And so we know that during the pandemic, during the shut-in, a lot of children were impacted by this because some of the predators that they were with were family members. And 90% of children know their abusers. And so we want to make sure we allocate funds for that here. The program that we're proposing will be about $20,000. That is what we're requesting. And next month, we're actually working with an organization by Pastor Sharon Hobbs, who's going to be able to have a human trafficking walk here in Boynton Beach. So we want to be able to have that funding for the children to be able to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commission and Mayor. My name is Chuck Ridley. I have the privilege of being the political coordinator for your blue collar workers at CIU. Many of the members of our organization all throughout Palm Beach County live here in Boynton, and many live in the heart of Boynton. And so as their representative, I'm here to congratulate this board and your staff for the foresight that you have in this process that you are putting out today. I have the opportunity to observe city councils and commissions all through Palm Beach County. And I'm about to say to you, not one has had the foresight to do and look at what you are struggling through. It is not easy. The ARP dollars came to change how business is done. You are struggling through that. But I'm also watching key stakeholders in the community struggle through that same process. I'm aware of several organizations that have come together, organizations who will compete, but have put that aside and are looking to work in a complementary, not competitive manner. It's not just about cost savings, it's because they now have a new North Star. And that was set up by your staff. You have a community ready to meet you. You have a staff ready to take this forward. Elected body, are you ready to take it to the next level? Because you can, City of Boynton, be the flagship for how community business is done moving forward. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.
I feel like I should say amen. That was very powerful. Thank you, Mr. Ridley.
My name is Pastor Ray Whiteley, One Beach Coalition of Clergy, also Trinity Counseling Center. I just wanted to bring clarity to the document that you have on the proposal. We originally sent in the proposal when it first opened up. In the last 2 weeks, we decided that for the greater good of the community and stakeholders, we got back together and we created a huge proposal with the faith-based CDC that includes many of the stakeholders that Mr. Ridley mentioned. So I didn't want it to seem as if we're on both proposals, and we would concede to the second as a part of the greater good for the community. Under that proposal, you have 8 different stakeholders, organizations that have created one big proposal. We've identified the fiscal agent that would serve as that fiscal agent for all the organizations, meeting the requirements that you guys spoke about here. So I just wanted to bring clarity to it. I didn't want to make it seem as if we were on 2 different proposals. So I am supporting the latter one that we weren't able to get in before that time. And I will make sure that each one of you guys have an email of it. So thank you very much. And me, like Chuck Ridley, believes that you guys are doing an awesome job. And I support what are you doing in this moment. Thank you.
Can you quickly say what those 8 organizations are?
Good test of memory.
Okay, could I ask Katora to come? You should have the proposal, but may I ask Katora to come just to identify the different organizations?
We did email it out to the commission too, I think today or yesterday, maybe David did.
Katura Joseph, Boynton Beach Faith-Based Community Development Corporation. I am the executive director, and like Reverend Whiteley just said, we're sorry to have submitted our application late. We were trying to form this collaboration, and we had several meetings with several stakeholders, and we were talking and and so it came together lately, very late, and I apologize for that, but
Katura, you're not late.
No, you're not right.
Relax. Everybody in the room
Well,
can relax. No one was late.
Everyone is submitted except us. So that's why I feel as if we're late. So Boynton Beach Faith-Based CDC will be the lead agency with this group. And so it's us, it's Healthier Boynton Beach, it's Boynton Strong, Pathways to Prosperity, Trinity Counseling Center, Boca Helping Hands, Boynton Beach Mental Health Community, and the Coalition of Clergy. We had several meetings. We sat together for several weeks trying to come together to put a proposal together that we can fit under one umbrella. It is a collaborative effort with all of those agencies coming together. And I have one other question.
Yes.
Before I get to happy, someone said something about cutting a check. Is this going to be a check forward or a reimbursement process like we always do with the city? Myra, who can answer that question?
We literally don't know that yet, but I'm
Okay.
thinking more likely reimbursement. But well, I can't say that.
I
It
was
may
getting
not be.
happy.
You may need the seed money.
I'm
Right, so we
getting,
gotta
I'm getting
figure that out.
happy. So
Yeah.
that's just clarification. Thank you. Anything else?
Because we can do both.
Unless you're done, not done.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
But on that vein, though, I would direct staff as we create the wording for this grant offer, that a portion of the funds would be available immediately once the grantee would be awarded, and then, the directives of that grant kind of continue to follow along the path. But I definitely see Ms. Joseph's point about trying to do the reimbursement. That's always usually one of the most difficult points about any business doing business with government.
I mean, we got a question online. Julian Blankenship, a comment. Many local Boynton Beach nonprofits would be interested in applying and have been in conversation with each other about partnerships, although they were waiting to apply until an RFP or notice was formally issued, or we recently submitted to the city a basic proposal that was not mentioned this evening. There's great interest among nonprofits to address local needs of the community. And I think that's kind of where the discussion is today. Yuri, is there anyone else with their hand raised or asking questions?
There was a hand raised earlier. It was put down, and there is no other hands raised at this time. Actually, there is one. Sharon Hobbs. I will unmute.
Thank you.
Sharon Hobbs. Sharon Hobbs, you are unmuted.
Thank you so very much for allowing me to speak. Yes, I've been listening to the proceeding, and no, I have not previously submitted a request, but our event, or the event for the community, will take place on next month on January 22nd, a human trafficking awareness walk and presentation. So we expect it to be very impactful, but as I'm listening, I'm seeing that the funds will not be available before that time. So we're asking for $5,000 to pay for media support and for food and for all the activities that go along with that. So I'm just saying that it may be a little bit too late.
Sharon, I would say, I don't know if we are allowed to use this for events. So I would suggest you come back at the 5:30 City Commission meeting and make a formal request to the City Commission, who may be able to use their community support funds in a more expedited manner.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right. And seeing no other people, I would like to get my few comments in. We don't have a second meeting in December. And so that kind of means that we should have that application ready for the commission approval by January 4th. So my hope is that, David, you think within 2 weeks, by the 21st, you can have the draft sent to us, and that we'll have our individual comments to you by let's say the 30th or the 29th, or no, let's put it on the 27th, so that we have that weekend to make the comments, have a discussion, hopefully with you, whether in person or over the phone, so that you can compile the commission's comments for the final application, where we can make slight adjustments. With it going out probably that Friday, after making any slight adjustments at the city commission meeting, you would need to have that workshop, so to speak, after which I would think would be in 7 to 14 days. So anywhere from the 14th to the 21st. With, I'm thinking that if it comes out on the 7th, then you need at least 30 days, which would probably be past the first meeting. So I would probably say either the 11th or the 18th, and that on March 1st, that the commission then decides the allocation of the funds, because anything past March 1st, we don't necessarily have that ability. Or myself, Commissioner Katz, and Commissioner Ramos do not have that ability. So that's kind of my mentality. Oops.
Your time's up, Mayor.
Your time's up.
Timeline for the aspect. It is going to be an aspect of reimbursable versus seed funding, where seed funding would always be a little bit smaller than reimbursable to start off with. What I would say is that part of the application is, the actual funds going to the community, not being necessarily spent through the nonprofit. So if it is job training or housing, how is that money going to the community, to the actual people, so to speak? And the last thing that I didn't see on that, I'll ask Carice if it's available, is transportation in underserved communities, because I would like to see the city move forward with a bike or ride sharing component, because that is something I believe the city has looked in. I think it's an aspect of a regional, speaking with Lake Worth or Delray, that we need to make sure that our community is able to, get to one place from here to another. Otherwise, it's all for moot if they can't travel.
We did talk about that, Mayor, and it's about connecting the community to jobs, and Carice could certainly go into a little more detail.
Yes, sir. A bike share program, which is normally considered a mobility program, to make it fit into the ARPA, it would have to have two important elements. Number one, it would have to serve the disproportionately impacted communities in Boynton Beach, your qualified census tract. So it would have to be specifically for those areas of the city. And secondly, why are we providing them that type of transportation? It would be to get to job centers, or to food if they live in a food desert, for example. Something that is a negative impact on a disproportionately impacted community, you could connect the dots and say a ride share program helps people get to, again, food, jobs, job training, education, that type of thing.
Okay. And so my final comment would be the recommended priorities and budget. I would want to move $500,000 from economic stability and resiliency and their job training aspect and move that all to educational opportunity and job skills development. Commissioner Pincirga.
I have two entirely separate trains of thought and questions, and Carissa may have to ask for your assistance on this one. What I have not seen yet in these proposals, and I'm so glad you mentioned food, is precisely that. We have all spoken about the food desert in the heart of Boynton, the need for a healthy, fresh food grocer. I'm looking for someone to address that. So if somebody comes forward with a plan to do that, that would have my vote. This is something that have been discussed over and over up on the commission. I was there at the community listening session. We've heard it over and over. If somebody could address it, strong, solid plan, long-term, sustainable, meets the needs of the community. You want to talk about stretching the money to make the maximum impact? Long-term dividends, what could be better than food and health?
Commissioner,
The second question, we talked about seed funding, and that was one of the other items I heard. And Carissa, we had this conversation, but it was unfortunately like several months ago, so you could brush up my memory here. You said something along the lines of the money could be used for economic development, but it could be used for economic recovery. And what I was hearing from the community was, could there be a seed funding program to maybe help husband and wife team start a catering business? That kind of something small and entrepreneurial would have really helped them greatly during the pandemic when they couldn't have worked or they had lost their job, but they had that small business to support them. Those kind of projects and support typically don't doesn't fall under other categories. So I wanted to ask, is that possible, that kind of seed program, micro loan, I don't even know what to call it, for like truly small businesses as a stepping stone to something bigger?
Let me answer your second question first. And yes, as a matter of fact, the Treasury had sent out a question and answer response based upon the IFR for clarification. And in that Q&A, it does specifically say that it can be used for small business startups, for people who were negatively impacted by the COVID-19 health emergency, or for small business startups within a disproportionately served community. So that is a possibility that they could ask for money for that. The other one, to resolve the issue of food deserts within the city. And it's funny because you remember, Lori, we've talked about that 10
years ago.
10 years ago. The problem that we had back at that time was that in economic development, you have to have the businesses who want to come into the area. And that's why you have the Dollar General there. They were the only business that offered some sort of food purchasing. So the CRA put that in above any of the other businesses that wanted to go in because they had a type of food that you could purchase. I would say if it is going into, again, it goes back to the requirements in the IFR. If it is a disproportionately impacted community and food has been identified as something that is a negative impact, people not getting the food, the nutrition, or even the amount of food, yes, you can use that money to somehow provide the food, whether it be, as we see now, Vice Mayor Hay, he volunteers over at the Hester Center. People drive through and they put food in people's trunks. If you wanted to do something more permanent.
Yes.
So
that is the key.
Okay, so we would have to look at that to find out exactly what criteria we could make that fit with, but it's in there. If we want to provide food resources to a qualified census tract community, yes, that is an eligible use.
Commissioner, one of the ideas that we kicked around around food, and we haven't talked to Carice yet, but community gardens, they bring a community out, they bring communities together. They help for building safety around communities, and they build resiliency within communities. So that might be something, depending on how that's structured, that could be something that one of our nonprofits may want to propose. So just some additional thoughts around that.
But to be clear, I don't want anything temporary.
Right.
Something temporary when there's an emergency, but I'm talking about long-term, so permanent grocer.
Anyone else from the board or commission, I'm sorry? Otherwise, I would request that amendment of moving $500,000 from economic stability and resilience to educational opportunities and job skills development.
I would support that and make that motion.
Second.
Is there any final discussion from the commission? Seeing none, all those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is that everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so hearing no, all those opposed state so by saying nay. Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Mayor, is it the will of the commission for us to now go forward and create the notice of funding opportunity for?
So now I'll ask for that second motion to create the grant application for staff to create that grant application with it to be finalized at the January 4th City Commission meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Mayor, may I
Yep.
add one more? There's the issue of the city partnership opportunities where the city has different ideas or concepts, such as the partnership with the principals of the elementary schools that we may wish to bring forward from time to time to the commission for approval. Is that still acceptable under the ARPA?
So the issue that we heard from Commissioner Katz, and I'll let you verify that he's requesting the school district. So it's almost in the point that we'll have part of your job in the next few weeks is having the conversation with the county, the school district, because if we're doing unincorporated Boynton Beach, how can we, does the ARPA allow funds from the county be given to the city to be spent in that manner?
Yeah, and I think one of the ideas that we were talking about was creating like a job training program with the high school where we have them come and work and end up with a certification during the school year. And I talked to Jay Bogus about it a little bit, and he said they'd love to craft a program with us, but that may take some funding, some sort, but it would be a partnership with the district.
So what I would say is that I absolutely would want and give consensus to have us to work with the school district and the county to maximize the ARPA funds for Palm Beach County as a region.
And quick question on arts and after school enrichment programs for the schools. And speaking with, we had a Zoom call with all the elementary school principals, and for instance, Point Siena, they're mostly STEM where they don't have exposure to the arts, and these are kids in Title I schools that we could work with them to create art and music programs at our cultural center and allow the kids to come over after school and perhaps have access to those programs that they wouldn't normally have for free, to craft some programs possibly like that, or after school, but more enrichment programs to the inordinately hurt populations that otherwise could not afford or have access to that type of enrichment, to perhaps use some ARP to do that. So we would like to explore that as well.
In addition, I know that Commissioner Katz has in the past has helped donate to a scholarship fund. That's kind of that aspect of the youth empowerment, so to speak, that if we have someone who qualifies for a scholarship, being in the low or a very low income bracket, that the children are not, or the children have the opportunity to be a part of extracurricular activities in the city of Boynton Beach. I would definitely want to make sure that those funds are being used and that So we don't have any empty space in our extracurricular activities that we fill all of that up.
Mayor, based on some of the questions we received from the commission tonight, I feel I need to ask the question, are we opening up the notice of funding opportunity to both nonprofit and profit entities? Because some of the things that y'all asked about, you know, the startups for the mom and pop business and bike share program, and if we're going to have someone come in and do a permanent grocery store, those are usually for-profit businesses.
And so, you know, based upon our comments, yes, it's kind of the sense is that we are not limiting it to nonprofits.
And I concur with that. The COVID-19 has impacted all of us, whether you're a profit or nonprofit. And I've had the opportunity of looking through this document that I happen to have a copy of that Katura Joseph was talking about. And a lot of those type of ideas and concepts are addressed in here, and I'm pretty excited about it. But I'm of the opinion that we've got to help everybody that we can, whether they're profit or nonprofit.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, my only comment would be that I would still give preference to nonprofit entities, just because of the nature of the work that they do and the impact of service that they provide to the residents that they serve. I'm not saying that we shouldn't open it up to for-profit. I'm just saying I would still give preference, or perhaps there should be a division of allocation for-profit versus nonprofit. I don't know if that's a conversation that needs to be had, but that's just my opinion.
I think it's kind of the fact that we have the ability to award. And so that will be up to us determining it, because someone may ask for $1 million, we could award them 100,000, and vice versa. If somebody asks for 100,000, we say, you know what, we really like what you're doing. Would you be willing to take it 150,000 to expand it? We have that capability, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's absolutely, you know, that's part of the whole thing, is that we're focusing on making the community better. And so the nonprofits have that component where it's not going to administrative funding, it's for expansion, so to speak. And if there's a for-profit that wants to do that as well, knowing that we're helping them offset costs to be profitable in the community.
Sure. And I think all that can be addressed when we have the draft NOFO for you to look at, that we fine tune those types of, and maybe perhaps in a ranking, there's a preference or between the two. So when we bring that back to you in January, you'll have it before then, but we'll hash it out then.
Well, let me complete my thought here.
Okay.
On that discussion level, but we have all of our vetting from a city standpoint included by January the 4th, because on January the 4th, we're going to make some.
No. We'll just be finalizing the application to put on the streets for 30 days on January 4th.
Right.
Then based on the criteria in the application, we'll review it. We'll, however we end up doing it, ranking, what have you, and then bring that back to the commission.
Okay.
To then decide how you want to divide it up, and recommendations or what have you will have, but that's not till after the NOFO goes out.
Gotcha.
Yes, Commissioner Katz.
So to, excuse me, to my request before for identifying and communicating with any or any identified nonprofit within the city, given if it's a 30-day window, as has been floated around right now, so I'm going with that in my head. Is there a way, I know the application draft won't be for X amount of weeks, and then we'll have input, and then it'll come back on the 4th for approval to go out for 30 days. Is there a way to get a communication out prior to the holidays, just noticing those nonprofits so that they don't find out about it in the 30-day window and effectively clip their wings on that? I would love to see those nonprofits be made aware before we deliberate on the 4th. That way, those who have an interest have been given a chance, notified. Now they can start engaging if they haven't been, and they have their 30 days just like anybody who's been in the loop.
It'll be a keep your eyes out email. It'll be in our newsletter. It'll be on our website. We're going to blast it out everywhere. But we have a good list of the nonprofits, actually, that affect Boynton, even outside of Boynton. When we did our nonprofit stakeholder, that's exactly what we did. We utilized that distribution list to notify everybody. And still people missed it. So we're just going to try to and help us spread the word. But we will hit every form we can to get the communication out.
Mayor,
Yes.
very briefly, just wanted to echo the sentiments of Commissioner Romulus here. I would also give preference to nonprofits, but I understood what you said as well. So for me, at the end of the day, I have my preferences, but I just want the problem solved. We have a food desert, long-term sustainable grocer. However we get there, as long as it works, problem solved. The other item I wanted to bring up is when I brought up the idea of seed funding for small local businesses, mom and pop shops, could we also explore the possibility that that's something that we as the city government do directly? That is to say, instead of, paying other people to administer that, we already have people here at City Hall that could also administer that, similar to what the CRA may do. I just don't want to spend more on overhead than necessary. If we could kind of cut on those costs so we could spend more of that money to the actual seed funding, that would be ideal.
Yep. And we also even partnered with the county where the county says, we have so much money on the rental assistance and all that. Don't create your own program. Get people help to apply to use their money because they're having a hard time they've given out hundreds of millions of dollars. So other places that we can tap that people have that template in place is not for us to have to create a whole new program, is to use what's working.
We have our template for our small business grants that the city
could use that.
already issues. We could just expand that to include micro businesses.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we're going to have 10 minutes for our next meeting.
Yeah, and you got to eat.
You got it. The green light's not on.
One more question too, Carice. How strongly is the sustainability element of the vetting process from what that document that you talked about? Is a lot of weight put on that about, when this runs out?
Right. Sustainability of programming is encouraged by the Treasury Department. It's not an actual requirement. However, that said, the City Commission has the ability to put whatever requirements you wish in that application. So we could actually put a question in there and weight it that says, after your ARPA funds run out, how do you plan on continuing your program, or something along those lines?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
If there's no other comments, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting's adjourned.